Might sound ridiculous today, but considering literacy rates were only about 5% back then, wealthy people didn't need good eyesight as much as they need it now. In some rare instances, having bad eyesight was actually helpful to those in the elite class. For example, Queen Elizabeth I was actually short-sighted, and author John Howard actually wrote in his book, The Annals of Queen Elizabeth I, that she was sweet and lively, but short-sighted. Here's the thing. Most people didn't know that, and despite this, people are said to have admired her eagerness to be close and personal with her people, which ironically, she only did because she couldn't physically see them until she was close enough to smell them. Now, you didn't have to just be a king or a queen to be able to get by in life with bad eyesight. If you were at least upper middle class and had some access to wealth, your bad eyesight could also be less of an inconvenience because if you had the money, you could simply hire a servant to be your eyes for you. Literally a seeing eye person. Bartholomew, what is that? That's a stick. Bartholomew, what is that? That's a smaller stick. Bartholomew, what is this? That's Oliver. What's an Oliver? Oliver is a peasant. Oh, a poor. Okay, let's keep going. You know, it is so hard for me to see. Ah! But here's the thing, we're talking about most people, not the elites or not the wealthy. In the Dark Ages, wealth was not common. As a medieval peasant, doing manual labor such as plowing the fields while being almost legally blind didn't exactly guarantee your odds of survival. As a medieval peasant in the Dark Ages, almost every job that you were doing to survive included some level of physical strain and danger. And if you take away your sense of sight, your accuracy goes out the window and your chances of accidentally offing yourself go through the roof. Here's a few examples. Going on a night walk and not noticing the pack of wolves stalking you in the bushes. Chopping wood, missing, and cutting your foot off. Working as a blacksmith and literally touching anything that's hot, getting a burn injury and having that get infected. Eating rancid food or things that aren't even food at all. Going on a walk during the day and literally just getting lost because you can't see any landmarks. Bumping into the wrong guy with a sword. And of course, being terrible at jousting or even having to go to battle. That already has a basically 0% survivability rate, but I've never heard any stories of any famous blind knights. Next up, we have being born. Life isn't fair, but especially in the Middle Ages, life was even less fair. With an infant mortality rate between 300 and 500 infant deaths per 1,000 births, your chances of getting spawn killed by the Grim Reaper was only a little bit better than a coin flip with Freddy Krueger. To give you some perspective, as of 2024, currently, the worst infant mortality rate in the US is only 5.34 deaths per 1,000 births, or 0.5%. Now, surprisingly, in the Middle Ages, if you lived past childhood, odds were good that you'd live and die in your 60s or even 70s. Like I've mentioned in another one of my videos, the idea that people only lived into their 30s is only a statistic because the infant mortality rate was so high, making the average life expectancy far lower on paper. People didn't die at 30, but almost 50% of people didn't even see the age of 1. To give even more perspective on how bad the infant mortality rate was in the Middle Ages, even if you were born in Afghanistan today, which as of 2020 has the highest infant mortality rate in the entire world, they only have 42 deaths per 1,000 births, or 4.3%. You'd still have a 10 times higher chance of surviving in modern day Afghanistan than you did in medieval Europe. But to add insult to injury, this number also affected the women giving birth in almost equally horrifying numbers. For example, in 1420s Florence, giving birth was responsible for 1 in 5 of all deaths of married women, with one of the main factors contributing to this maternal mortality rate being infection. Not so surprising. They really didn't have the proper medical equipment or knowledge to make childbirth safe for mothers or children in medieval times. And in case this was just not upsetting enough, during this time for women, after they gave birth, they were ordered to remain within their birthing chamber for up to 6 weeks for a period of confinement to, as medieval priests would put it, cleanse themselves. As during this time, it was commonly believed by the masses and religious leaders that a mother's body was made impure by sex and childbirth, which is just wild because, like, dude, how did you think you got here? Wait, sorry, one sec, guys. My head is getting really itchy. I don't think you guys know this, but I actually have a lot of hair. Oh, and if you think the luscious locks on my head are impressive, then you'd probably be surprised by my body hair, too. Now, I know this may be shocking to some of you, and for your sake, I'm gonna shave. Luckily, I have the best help when it comes to personal grooming, and they happen to be today's video sponsor, Manscaped. Okay, now don't skip, because I'm gonna make this cool. When you've got the confidence of more than 10 million men worldwide, it's pretty clear that Manscaped has mastered the art of producing superior men's grooming and hygiene tools for your family jewels. You might be asking, Brody, you don't have balls. And what I would say to that is, well, why you're looking, and also you're right. But I do have one ball, my head, and it works amazingly on my ball. Specifically with their latest grooming and hygiene bundle, the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra, featuring the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. The 5.0 Ultra brings precision grooming to a whole new level with dual skin-safe blade heads and interchangeable foil blade for enhanced performance. What's the purpose of this foil blade? Well, to leave that irresistibly smooth, bare finish as it moves softly across your skin, snatching even the finest hairs. Just look at my head now. And as you can see, I'm not bleeding profusely. That's thanks to the skin safe technology. This may also shock you, but I also have nostrils, and that's exactly where the Weed Whacker 2.0 comes in. The Weed Whacker 2.0 allows me to say goodbye to those bothersome nose hairs that literally stick out of my nose. You guys might have never seen them, but that's because I've had the Weed Whacker 2.0 for a while, and it allows me to trim my Guinness Book of World Record level nose and ear hair. It's also waterproof, cordless, and has skin safe technology as well. After my nose is trimmed, my ball is shaved, I always use the Crop Soother and Crop Preserver. The Crop Soother soothes my skin after a clean shave, and the Crop Preserver keeps my ball feeling and smelling fresh. But bros, that's not the best part. Because you're watching this video, when you purchase a Performance Package 5.0 Ultra, you will also receive 2 free gifts. First up, an awesome pair of boxers, the Boxers 2.0. They are extremely comfortable and have a family jewels pouch. And you will also get the Shed 2.0, which is a great toiletry bag. So with that being said, head over to manscaped.com and get your hands on the Ultimate Performance Package 5.0 today. Use the promo code TMB, trust me bro, and you'll get 20% off plus free international shipping and 2 free gifts. Thank you, Manscaped, for sponsoring this video and keeping my ball safe. Now, back to other things that could get you killed in medieval times. Pirates! No, pirates isn't how they got here. Pirates is the next entry on the list. Kind of. Although the golden age of piracy is considered to be between 1650 and 1720, pirates have been shameless menaces to society for most of recorded human history. What's worse is towards the end of the Dark Ages, governments on both sides of war would actually incentivize pirates by funding their crews in order to use them as ravaging machines of war, essentially turning pirates into mercenaries for hire, and not like in a TF2 kind of way. These state-funded pirates were actually called privateers, and because of these privateers, at the end of the Middle Ages, you probably would have not wanted to be a sailor. That's because most of the time, if you got captured by these pirates and they didn't need you as a slave, you'd most likely just be thrown overboard. But if you were so lucky to be a slave and to not die immediately, well, then you're in for a real treat, because this asshat named Barbossa only used galleys to get around, which is a smart person way of saying big rowboat. And who exactly do you think is going to be rowing Barbossa's boat? That's right, you're a sorry ass, because you didn't realize that this sea menace named Hay-Ridden Barbossa, or as some called him, Redbeard, was going to capture you and your boy Amicus from your merchant vessel and turn you into full-time paddling technicians of local lords and communities. But in the 13th century, local courts became more common. However, before the Pope banned it in 1215, trial by ordeal was the most common method of justice. What is trial by ordeal, you may ask? Basically, they would give you an impossible task and assume that if you were innocent, God would perform a miracle in order for you to not die. I think you get where I'm going with this. There are plenty notable methods of going about this, but one of the most popular examples is trial by fire. A supposed criminal would be asked to walk over 10 feet of red-hot coals, and if their feet weren't burnt at the end of it, they were deemed innocent by the priest. During the witch hunts in medieval Europe, a supposed witch was lowered into water by rope, and if she sank, she was deemed innocent, and if she floated, she was deemed guilty. After this administration of justice, however, laws and trials became more commonplace. Because the king wrote whatever laws he wanted, some of them were pretty random and had harsh sentences. For example, in 1198, one law ordered blinding and castration as a punishment for anybody who got caught hunting venison in the royal forest. This definitely had a chance of getting you killed, since preventing infection was not an easy task in the 13th century. In 1209, court records note that a man named Hugh was accused of doing just this. Petrified, Hugh fled to a church where he remained for a month until he escaped by disguising himself as a woman. Another obscure law that could get you killed had to do with bread. Yes, bread. To reduce competition amongst bakers, in 1266, a law was enacted to ensure that all bakers sold their bread at the same weight. Because breaking this law had potentially serious consequences, most bakers gave their customers extra bread just in case. And if someone was found baking underweight bread, they would be fined. And if they continued to do this, they would be pilloried. For context, this is a pillory. And getting pilloried is when you are in the town square, getting, well, hurt. The pillory could get you killed as the crowd's behavior towards you was usually unpredictable. Typically, criminals in the pillory would get rotten eggs, mud, filth, and animal crap thrown at them. But if you caught the crowd on a bad day or said something that pissed them off, or maybe you weren't the nicest baker in the world, they would become violent, hurling stones and bricks at you, which often led to death. That wasn't always the case though, as the crowd's reaction often depended on the context of your crime. For example, in 1703, Daniel Defoe was sentenced to a pillory for causing people to rebel against the state. But because he was regarded as a hero among the crowd, he was pelted with flowers, making his punishment almost nothing. A little bit of a sweet twist there, which is something you don't typically get in a morbid Trust Me Bro video, but enjoy it because it doesn't last long. One last obscure law is the banning of football in medieval England in 1388, which actually brings us to our next point, medieval football.
Nowadays, people think rugby is a rough sport. Well, let me tell you what makes rugby look like a relaxing evening at your Nana's knitting club. Medieval football, which originally started around the 14th century, was actually known as mob football. And mob football is exactly what it sounds like. See, this wasn't like modern football where there was rules or field and a specific amount of players or even a referee. These games were played in medieval towns and villages. Get an inflated pig bladder on your team's side of town by any means possible. And when they say any means, they really meant any means. In fact, the only rules of the game regarding getting the pig's bladder to the other side of town were that you could not commit murder or manslaughter. However, because of this lack of rules and mob mentality, things could easily get crazy, often leading to fights that look like small-scale wars, groups of people turning on just one person, or people even forgetting where the end zone even was. Although a succession of royals in the 14th century tried to ban it, calling it a common, undignified, and worthless game, peasants just didn't care and kept playing anyway. At this time, the nobility was trying to promote a more civilized sport, archery, which would benefit the king because it was also a useful skill when it came to war times. But mob football, simply put, was far too much fun. It was a concerningly common occurrence to die from the game, either from being trampled to death by your own team or from other accidents. For example, in 1321, it was reported that one player died from a wound sustained after accidentally running onto a sheathed knife, which is extra dumb because, like, not only are you dying in a game, but you died in a game by running onto a sheathed knife. Like, that's what it has the cover on. Regardless, mob football was a spectacular sport gathering big crowds to watch the games, and the legend even lives on till today. But nowadays, people don't really die. They just get millions of dollars and traumatic brain injuries. Witchcraft. Specifically, practicing witchcraft. In the Middle Ages, people often think of witches when they hear of witchcraft, which makes sense. But there is specific terms for men who practice witchcraft as well. Maleficio, Wicca, or warlocks. This comes from the Latin term maleficio, which was considered to be sorcery or witchcraft that was conducted in the intention of causing harm. A lot of people don't really understand in the time period. Back then, weren't like your crazy ex from university who you broke up with because they peed on your bed and they told you they were going to cast a love spell on you. Witches in the medieval ages were not only highly respected, but also highly feared. When you think about the 14th century, you have to remember how much power the church had. Belief in God, spirits, and demons was taken as a given. So when somebody said that they were able to cast a spell on you or send a demon your way, that was a serious and scary threat. And because of the Catholic power structure, when you openly opposed God as a witch, you were deemed as opposing the entire state itself. Although there are different words for both genders, the most common theme of both is that they were both considered occultists or sorcerers. Sorcerers were seen as somebody who tried to reshape the world through the occult. Now, how did they do this? Basically, every once in a while, someone came along who made a spectacular claim about the spirit world, and they had received perceived credibility, claiming that it had something to do with Solomon from the Bible. This happened because someone once wrote a book labeled The Testament of Solomon, which claimed that King Solomon from the Bible enslaved particular demons to help build his temple. The only problem with this claim is that this book was written many centuries after King Solomon from the Bible. Another example of this is a book translated from Latin known as the Book of the Offices of Spirits, or the book called Empto by King Solomon, about a prince and kings of demons. Strangely enough, this book is mostly only known through references. Neither the original copy nor the author ever have been found. There are instructions on how to work with specific demons that were actually mentioned in the Bible to carry out evil deeds on your behalf. With this context, it makes no sense why the entire medieval population hunted witches at one point. It's because people were scared of them. And to make things worse, anything bad that happened to them was blamed on someone supposedly practicing witchcraft. For example, if something bad happened to John that could not be readily explained, and John felt like Richard disliked him, John may have suspected Richard of causing him harm by occult means, aka witchcraft. In fact, the most common suspicions that you might be a witch were livestock, crops, storms, disease, and even sexual dysfunction. So basically, if someone didn't like you and something bad happened to them, you could easily be proclaimed a witch. In total, tens or hundreds of people were executed, and others were imprisoned, tortured, banished, and had their lands and possessions confiscated. So yeah, practicing witchcraft could have definitely gotten you killed. And even if you didn't practice witchcraft, the simple hysteria of it all could easily have gotten you killed as well. Following witchcraft, we have a semi-similar topic: alchemy. Alchemy started in the Middle Ages, and some say it is actually a precursor to modern chemistry. At the heart of medieval alchemy is the belief that all matter was composed of 4 elements: earth, air, fire, and wind. And with the right combination of elements, any substance on earth could be formed. Alchemists believed that the transmutation of one substance into another was possible, and that's how the stereotype of alchemists trying to turn lead into gold came to be. What many people didn't know, however, was that alchemists were also trying to create an all-powerful elixir to cure disease and make anyone who drinks it immortal. This required finding the philosopher's stone, an elusive substance that was believed to, quote, make possible an elixir of immortality and transmutation of substances into gold. So, how exactly could alchemy kill you? It seems like it could only make you stronger, right? Well, the problem with alchemists is they had no idea what they were doing. You see, these weren't scientists of the modern day who put their medicines through clinical trials and testing. Back then, if you could make a metal drinkable, they would have given it to you and called it an elixir of immortality. For example, in Chinese alchemy, the official 24 histories record numerous Chinese emperors, nobles, and officials who died from taking elixirs to prolong their lifespans. This is because the elixirs of immortality they drank were just concoctions of toxic metals and minerals such as mercury and arsenic. Flash forward a few hundred years, and Iranian chemists discovered how to make gold dissolve in liquid, which was later dubbed royal water. The formula developed was a mixture of nitric and hydrochloric acid that could dissolve pure gold and produce gold chloride. It would then be mixed into water to create a drinkable form of gold. Alchemists up until the Middle Ages continuously made claims that drinking gold had incredible effects, calling it a elixir of life and the perfect element. They even claimed that consuming it would make your body indestructible and cure all illnesses. Despite these absolutely wild claims, even the newest formulas for drinkable gold elixirs up until the end of the Middle Ages had the same problem. It was highly toxic, highly corrosive, caused profuse salivation, chronic urination, increased sweating, the gold fever, and worst of all, kidney damage. So, unlike witchcraft, practicing alchemy wouldn't get you killed. However, being the customer of an alchemist definitely would. Bonus, yeah, there's actually 8, not 7. This one's just silly, so it's kind of short. Spontaneous human combustion. Yeah, you heard that right. Spontaneous human combustion is incredibly rare, yet documented and a proven phenomenon throughout history. What is it, you may ask? Well, basically, it's when a human spontaneously combusts into flames and dies. The only catch is the fire is not started from an external source, which is where the mystery comes from. Some theories about how this fire could have been ignited internally come from alcohol consumption or excessive body fat. In ancient times, officials would often explain these occurrences with the supernatural, or God's judgment. This one's kind of silly, but I thought you'd like it. Well, there you have it. Now you know about 7 unusual ways to die if you were alive in the Middle Ages. To conclude this episode, I'll summarize my key points into one simple sentence. If you ever go back to the Dark Ages, never go on a cruise or a pirate ship Study every single law that is passed in your area. If someone asks you if you want to play football, don't do it. Don't trust witches or alchemists or drink elixirs, even if the king drank it, or be a witch or a sorcerer or a king who has an alchemist, or make sure that you are not born with bad eyesight, spontaneously combusting into flames, or even born at all. And there you have it, bros. It's that easy. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to watch another history-based video, check out this video about what it was like to be rich in every time period. And as always, trust me, bro.
This video was made possible by Honey. Keep watching to find out how you can save money when you shop online. Also, the reviews are in. That's some nice merch. Get your brand new character pin, limited time face mask, and more. Link down below. Blah. Sigmund, I don't have much longer. Tell me, was I a good king? That's the Great War. He was made France, revolutionized agriculture, and developed great parklands. Probably not, because of the killings. Because of the killings. Sigmund, how did I get here? I still remember the good old days when I was a boy with a heart full of fire, and Mummy would teach me. Okay, Henry, this is a horse. Can you say horse? Divorce. What? No. Okay, let's try this one. Can you say loaf of bread? Loaf with her head. No, Henry, that's wrong. You know what? Last time. Okay. Can you say soap? Soap. Yes, that's it. I'm the supreme head of the church. Suckaroo the Pope. You know what? You're my son and I love you, but you're freaking weird, man. The year is 1491. England has just come out of 3 decades of civil war in which a bunch of Henrys, Edwards, and one Richard had a little face-off over which royal house would rule the realm. Finally, a Henry won, Henry VII, and he had a son. What should we name him? My royal lineage is full of Henry, a fine name, a vigorous name, a tenacious name, a muscular name. How about Arthur? And so Arthur, Prince of Wales, and next in line to the throne, was born. 5 years later, Henry was born, but nobody cares about him. He's not the heir, just a spare. The king wanted to make an alliance with Spain, so one day he said to his son Arthur, "Hey, baby, you see that lady baby? That's gonna be your wife. But father, I'm not even 3 years old yet. Listen, there's something you have to understand. You're my son. But more than that, you're a political bargaining tool. But you love me, right? I love you as a political bargaining tool. Yay. Hey, Pop, who the heck are you? I've written you a poem. Listen here, tiny man. Can't you see that I'm busy? But I'm your son. I have another son? As Arthur was in another palace, being prepped to become king, Henry lived with his mother and 2 sisters at Eltham, where he was being trained for a church career. And not just that, Henry learned languages. He played sports. He learned the recorder. What a nerd. Am I right? Wrong. Henry was the coolest kid around. So I told my Latin teacher he could kissius my buddies. Anyway, here's Wonder Woman. Great scholars and theologians from across Europe came to meet and teach the young Prince Henry, who by all accounts was a very enlightened, bright, and charming young boy. Everybody loved Henry. And out of everything Henry was taught, more than anything, he came to adore and respect theology and Catholicism. One of Henry's tutors was English poet laureate John Skelton, who wrote a textbook for Henry that we still have today. In it, he wrote a number of important lessons for the young prince, such as, do not be mean, loathe gluttony, and do not violate widows. Important lessons for any 9-year-old boy. Around this time, Henry's older brother Arthur, now 15 years old, was married to Catherine of Aragon, sealing the union between England and Spain. And then he died. Oh, my alliance with Spain, my poor alliance with Spain. And your son, sire? Oh, yes, of course, my son. But mostly my alliance with Spain. Hey, Pop, who the heck are you? Oh, yeah! And just like that, an unprepared Prince Henry was now the new heir to the throne. And how about that alliance with Spain? Well, the solution was simple. Hey, boy, see that full-grown woman over there? That's gonna be your wife. What, my brother's widow? Yes. You're a freaking weirdo, man. Now, in the Bible, there's a verse that says marrying your brother's widow, that's a big no. So the king needed to convince the Pope and get his special permission. Hey, can I please have my son marry his brother's widow? Sure, why not? And so it was. Henry's life was turned on its head as he moved to the royal court next in line to the throne. But tragedy struck when just a few months later, his mother, with whom he was very close, suddenly died in childbirth. The loss of his mother almost certainly had a big effect on the young boy. In his older years, King Henry VII went on a bit of a paranoid trip. As was normal for a king at the time, Henry VII had to quell a number of rebellions, and as he aged, he became ever more suspicious of the nobility around him. To keep them in check, he began levying huge, ruinous fines left, right, and center. Dukes, bishops, barons, even his own mother. No one was safe from his tyranny, and the nobility of England began to suffer. So when Henry VII finally got sick and died just after Christmas 1508, there was a lot of celebration. Not only because the tyrannical Henry VII was gone, but because his replacement was the ever-popular, charming, and handsome 18-year-old King Henry VIII. Henry married Catherine of Aragon in June 1509. You may be wondering, if it's so weird to marry your brother's widow, and since he's now king, couldn't Henry just decide not to? Well, yes, he could, but by now, Henry wanted to. The thing about Henry that, unlike many kings of the time, was he married for love, and he'd grown quite fond of Catherine. Very fond. Historians say their marriage was unusually good, and so he was coronated king. And what a king. Compared to his tyrannical father, he was an absolute joy. Having the blood of two royal houses, he was widely supported. He was really ridiculously good looking, and those famous calves could achieve world peace. Hey Henry, now that you're king, you know what that means. Costume party! Henry pranced around the palace playing dress-up with his friends. He wrote plays. He sang songs. He danced. A true Renaissance man, very different from the gluttonous wife killer we think of today. In his early reign, people from near and far would come to ask favors of the generous king. Hey man, could I gain ownership of some land near Upton Snodsbury? Sure thing, pal. Hey, could I be an earl or a baron or a viscount or something? Anything you want. Could I get, just a really cool pig that has, fucking metal wings and 8 legs and shoots flippin' lasers, and it can grow more pigs out of it for extra pigs? Say no more. Hey, guys, I was just checking up on the financial report, and what the hell? We can't afford this. Henry's council that he inherited from his father weren't happy with all the money he was just throwing around, and they worked hard to curb the king's spending. Since they controlled the royal seals needed to get stuff done, at first they were largely able to control the young king. And for Henry, the most infuriating things of all was they wouldn't let him joust with his friends because it was too dangerous, nor would they let him do the thing he wanted most, to go on a great, glorious, and expensive conquest against England's historic enemy, France. Please guys, I'll keep it cheap. How? I'm glad you asked. I've got a promo code for the financial version of war. Yeah. Honey is the free browser extension that automatically finds promo codes when you shop online. Imagine you're on one of your favorite websites. Not that one. And you want to reinvent yourself with some fresh new threads. Oh, hi little dancing man. Got any sick promo codes for me? You do? Nice. You just saved $40 on your online shop. You rock star. Honey supports over 30,000 online stores and has already helped Oversimplified viewers save over $87,000. That's a lot of moolah. Not having Honey is literally saying no to free money like a crazy person. It's free, finds coupons with one click, and it's now part of the Venmo and PayPal family. So you know it's legit. Get Honey for free at joinhoney.com/oversimplified. That's joinhoney.com/oversimplified. And you'll also be supporting my channel. So thank you. Now, where were we? Oh yeah, sexy calves, excessive spending, and Henry wanted glory. He wanted to go down in history. If he didn't go to war in France, was he even the king of England? Man, I want to go to war so bad, but the council won't let me. Hey, maybe I can help with that. Whoa, it's Cardinal Wolsey, one of my best friends. Despite being an old-ass man, Cardinal Wolsey knew that if he helped King Henry, there'd likely be something in it for him. So what was his great, intricate plan to curb the council's power? You're the king, dum-dum. You can do whatever you want. What? Wolsey began writing bills that simply didn't require the seals, and thus, Henry was back on top. For his efforts, Wolsey began to climb the ranks, and he became something of a yes-man for King Henry, encouraging Henry to frolic and play while Wolsey took care of business. Hey, kid, you want to go on an adventure? Do I ever? The Pope was at war with France and he needed some help. He offered the young, impressionable King Henry 100 Parmesan cheeses, some wine, and a golden rose if he came to the Pope's aid, and Henry was all in. At this point in his life, he still respected the church and loved the Pope. And here was the chance for war he had been waiting for. He still didn't have an heir, a fairly big problem for a monarch at the time. But right now, the only kind of smashing he was interested in was smashing French guys in the face. And so off he went. The English already held the French city of Calais. From there, Henry made a glorious victory at the Battle of the Spurs. He took the French cities of Terouanne and Tournai. Word of his victory spread. This was it. Here was the glory he had been waiting for. Back home, his beautiful wife also led armies to victory in Scotland, and better yet, she was pregnant. Soon, Henry would have an heir. All of Henry's wildest dreams were coming true. Oh, he ran out of money. As the French prepared to invade Italy, all Henry could do was go home. Well, at least now I have an heir to cheer me up. Bring me my son. Henry, this is Mary. Mary? That's a funny name for a boy. Henry, it's a girl. This was Catherine's 5th pregnancy that had not resulted in a male heir. Happy Henry wasn't so happy anymore. You still haven't given me a male heir. Well, how do you know it's my problem? Maybe it's your problem, Henry. It couldn't be my problem because I've been boinking half your maidstaff and one of them gave me a boy. Sure. Yeah, you know what? Maybe it's my problem. I'll look into that. Cardinal Wolsey, now Henry's Lord Chancellor, knew his job depended on keeping Henry happy, and so he said, well, if you can't be the great warrior, then how about the great peacemaker? Not as cool, but okay. And so the Field of the Cloth of Gold, a glamorous peace summit between England and France, was held. The King of France, Francis I, was essentially the French version of King Henry, and the whole thing was basically one giant codpiece measuring contest. The two sides did agree to a peace treaty. However, it didn't last long. See, there was a third major player in European politics at the time, an exquisite specimen of royal inbreeding, an heir to a huge inheritance, and a chin that could hit a home run. Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. He was Henry's wife's nephew. Henry had helped him out in the past to put down a Spanish rebellion, and now the two wanted to make an alliance, and so a marriage was arranged. Mary, I'd like to introduce you to your 22-year-old fully grown adult cousin, and now your future husband. Ew, he looks inbred. Mary! We're all inbred. With their new alliance, Charles and Henry agreed to team up and relaunch a campaign against France. In 1522, the English landed and stormed as far south as Agincourt, but Charles didn't commit significant forces. Whoops, sorry man, not sure what happened. I'll join in next year. The next year, England swept around France, almost taking Paris. But once again, where was Charles? Oh man, I'm so sorry. I promise, next year, I'll be there. The next year came, and a fed-up Henry decided he was going to sit this one out. Just as Charles ravaged the French at the Battle of Pavia and captured the French king. Holy crap, dude. Yeah, I totally kicked Francis, but that's great. So, can I have the French throne? No. What? And also, I don't want to marry your ugly daughter. Ugly? Have you seen your chin? Mummy says it's a strong chin for a strong boy. As Henry's alliance with Charles fell apart, Henry knew his days as a warrior were over. This was a problem for him, but it was a bigger problem for his wife. Catherine of Aragon had two jobs. The first was to give Henry a male heir. The second was to maintain an alliance with her relatives in Spain. She had failed, and Henry's sexy eyes began to wander. Home from all his wars, Henry ate up his daily 5,000 calories of meat as an infatuation began to grow for one of his wife's ladies in waiting, Anne Boleyn. Beautiful, intelligent, cultured. She was exactly Henry's type. Now, Henry had had dozens of mistresses, including Anne's sister, but Anne didn't want to just be Henry's sidekick. She wanted to be his queen. Henry sent dozens of letters, thirsty love notes. In one, he proclaimed that he would like to kiss her British husband. Henry's loins were on fire, but Anne kept him at just the right distance to drive him crazy and push him to find a way to get rid of his current wife. Wolsey, I want a divorce. And as the representative of the Pope here in England, I expect you to sort it out quickly and quietly. I don't want this to turn into a Europe-wide scandal. You got it, Your Majesty.
Hey, Big Papa! My boy Henry says he wants to divorce his wife. Any chance?
To Henry's shock and horror, Wolsey deferred the case back to the Pope in Rome. To make matters worse, after all the wars in Europe, the Pope was currently under the thumb of Charles V. Now everybody knew what was going on, and Henry's divorce trial had become a pawn of greater European politics. For Wolsey, the decision was a disaster. His job was to keep Henry happy, and Henry was very, very unhappy. Nevertheless, the divorce trial began. Henry's case rested upon the Bible verse in Leviticus that claimed marrying your brother's widow would lead to childlessness, and Henry was certainly having a hard time getting a male heir. He argued that the Pope had got it wrong when he allowed Henry to marry his brother's widow, and that now divorce was the only solution. However, the Pope and Charles V acquired some interesting letters from an unknown source. He wants to kiss her British duckies? Man, this guy's loins are on fire. The Pope now knew the case for divorce may not actually be found in Henry's Bible, but in Henry's hands. After escaping Charles V, he did send out Cardinal Campeggio to oversee the trial. Campeggio was an old man racked with gout. It took him 6 painful months to travel from Rome to England, and when he finally got there, this kept happening. Hey, I need you to take a look at this evidence. I can't. My gout is acting up. Hey, are you ready to take my testimony? I can't. My gout is acting up. Hey, can you please make a decision? I can't. Your gout is acting up. My gout is acting up. Anne Boleyn, with her Protestant views in support of the Reformation, suspected the Pope was just delaying. For 2 whole years, the trial dragged on, and in the end, the Pope simply said, no divorce for you. Henry, the king that had previously defended the Pope militarily from France and intellectually from the reformist ideas of Martin Luther, who had once respected the Pope above all, now found the Pope standing between him and 4th base. Your Majesty, what will you do? I'm the king, dum-dum. I can do whatever I want. What? For his failure, Henry removed Wolsey from the court, a decision that was likely influenced by Anne Boleyn, who disliked the cardinal. Having fallen from grace and with potential charges of treason over his head, Wolsey died of illness a year later. Then, Henry set about removing England from the influence of the Pope. Hey, if you do that, I'll excommunicate you. Who cares, man? Oh no, apathy. My weakness. Henry gathered theologians and scholars together to help him make his case against the Pope. Together, they argued to the people of England that the Pope's rule over the church was basically a takeover of what had once been a self-governing, national English church. And if that sounds familiar, some historians do believe this moment may have laid the foundations for English Euroscepticism. That's right, Brexit may have been influenced by Henry's explosive loins. By and large, the people gave Henry their support, and those that didn't were going to be in for a rough time. But for now, Henry assumed the role of supreme head of the English church, and his next divorce trial was a foregone conclusion. Catherine of Aragon was gone, and Anne Boleyn was in. Alright, I've upended the entire country to be with you, so you'd better give me a son, okay? Now, did you get my letter about the duckies? Having finally married the girl of his dreams, it was party time for Henry. And what a party. Life in the Tudor court was non-stop, huge banquets, with each person eating on average 5,000 calories a day. And no vegetables. Those are for poor people. Rich people ate meat. And so you know what else is for rich people? Constipation. But don't let that stop the party. The toilets are communal. And Henry himself was the center of everything. He ate the best food. He had 1,200 pairs of shoes. He didn't even have to wipe his own bum-bum. Life was great. Everyone, I give you your majesty, King Henry VIII. But how did they pay for it all? Well, influenced by his fairly Protestant new wife, since Henry had overturned the organization of the church, this is how they paid. Oh my goodness, how awful. Selling fake fragments of the cross? Vials of Jesus' blood that you got from a duck? Using religion in this way? This is terrible. I must confiscate all this money at once. Yes, how awful. I must take all of this away immediately. Monasteries across the nation were dissolved and their riches placed in the royal coffers. Obviously, many people weren't too happy about this, but Henry had a plan for that as well. Henry's descent into tyranny had begun, as any who rejected his new claim as supreme head of the culture found their heads on the chopping block. And so Henry fought, he danced, he sang, he jousted. Love glove, violate widows. In 1536, Henry fell from his horse in a jousting accident, not for the first time, but certainly the heaviest fall he had taken yet. Some historians believe the brain damage caused by the incident may have violently accelerated Henry's descent into tyranny. Executions in England ramped up. During his reign, it's estimated 57,000 to 72,000 people were put to death. Rich or poor, big or small, no one was safe. And the most prominent victim of all was to be Henry's own wife. It had been 3 years since their marriage. She had been pregnant 4 times, yet she had only been able to produce one healthy child, a girl. What's more, it's possible she had been going around insulting Henry's manhood. Henry's eyes, once again, began to wander. His new top man, Thomas Cromwell, didn't want to end up like Cardinal Wolsey, and so he came up with a plan. There was a court musician who had been quite flirtatious in public with the Queen. Well, Thomas Cromwell and his boys got a forced confession out of him, saying that it didn't stop at innocent flirtation, and the charges came rolling in. Listen, Anne, we need to talk. Oh no, you're gonna divorce me, aren't you? Just like your last wife. Aw, no, come on, no, I'm not gonna divorce you. It's much worse than that. Anne was charged with adultery, perversion, even incest, and plotting to kill the king himself. The jury found her guilty, including her own uncle and ex-fiancé, both fearing the wrath of the king. And on May 19th, 1536, Anne Boleyn was Anne Boleyn. Literally the next day, Henry married one of Anne's ladies-in-waiting, Jane Seymour, his third wife. After Anne had smack-talked his manhood, and since he still had no male heir, Henry went on a campaign to ensure the public knew he was as virile as it gets. He had this famous portrait painted of the manliest man I've ever seen, and later, he would even have his physician make a declaration about his health. King Henry is a fine specimen of a man, and please don't make me say this. Say it. And every time I look at him, I wish I was a woman. The truth is, after his jousting accident, the king had badly injured his leg and was no longer very active, yet he was still eating his daily 5,000 calories. So by now, Henry was extremely unhealthy. For the remainder of his life, he would incur a number of illnesses, and his injured leg ulcers would ooze stinking pus. A fine specimen of a man indeed. On the church front, Henry's new and now pregnant wife was a devout Catholic, and she pleaded with the king to reinstate the monasteries. Henry was sick of wives meddling in his business, and he bluntly warned her to remember what happened to Anne Boleyn. Since splitting with the Pope, Henry had been hard at work determining the theology of his new Church of England. It kept many Catholic traditions, while on the other hand embracing some reformist ideas, such as requiring the use of a new Bible not in Latin, but in English. The cover of Henry's new Bible depicted the people appearing to worship a giant King Henry, and in the corner, there's some people being put to death, just for good measure. For any who opposed Henry's ideas, whether Catholic or Protestant, for any who rebelled against him, it would be off with their heads. In October 1537, Henry finally got what he had been waiting for. His wife Jane gave birth to a healthy boy. However, the triumph soon turned to tragedy, as Jane Seymour died days later from complications during the birth. Henry mourned Jane, the woman who had given him a son, for 2 years. Your Majesty, it's time to choose your next wife.
Thomas! Not now! Can't you see I'm in mourning?
That one. The woman Thomas Cromwell had lined up for Henry's next marriage was the sister of a powerful German duke. But all Henry cared about was that she was pretty as pie, and Thomas Cromwell promised that indeed she was. However, when she arrived in England, Henry was less than pleased. Your Majesty, let me introduce you to your fourth wife, Anne of Cleves. What's that smell? I think it's your leg, sire. No, it's Anne of Cleves. She's ugly! This is treason! What? Off with his head! Henry found his new wife so repulsive that he never consummated the marriage and divorced her just 6 months later. And for bringing Henry an ugly, stinky woman, along with additional charges of plotting treason, Thomas Cromwell lost his head. The very same day of Cromwell's execution, Henry married his fifth wife, the famed beauty Catherine Howard. She's believed to have only been 17 at the time. Henry was 49. And like Anne of Cleves, Catherine Howard didn't last long. You see, for some reason, she may not have been entirely satisfied with her 49-year-old fine specimen of a man, and it's possible she engaged in a number of extramarital affairs, including one with her cousin, Thomas Culpeper. When Henry found out, he was devastated.
How could she do this to me?
But, sire, don't you have hundreds of mistresses?
Shut up, Barry. That's not the point.
Your Majesty, you're crying. I'm not crying. It's just that sometimes, when I get sad, water comes out of my eyes! For her treason, Catherine Howard met the same fate as Anne Boleyn in 1542. So, we've had divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded. Look out, here comes survive. Henry married the daughter of a royal official, Catherine Parr, in 1543. And she appears to have been a good companion to Henry. She cared for the aging king, who by now was so heavy it took several men to winch him onto his horse. She acted as a mediator within the family, and convinced the king to restore his two daughters to the line of succession. Their marriage did have one hiccup, however. When Catherine Catherine dare disagree with the king over the subject of theology. It's a miracle because when the priest says the words of institution, the bread turns into the body of Christ. Well, if you put the bread in a box for 3 months, is it a miracle that it turns moldy? Treason! You can't just call everything treason, Henry. The king called for her arrest, as serious charges were placed over her head. However, in the end, she told Henry that she had not been disagreeing with him, but simply learning from him. And so when the guards came to arrest her, the king told them to make like an Anne and cleave. Catherine Parr stayed with Henry right until the end.
You're watching a toothbrush play Billie Eilish. But did you know that there's a YouTube Music app where you can also listen to the EDM?
As he aged into his later years, in increasing pain and ill health, he grew ever more suspicious and moody. The once generous, promising young king was now feared by all around him. Sigmund, I don't have much longer. Hold me. Of course, sire. Do you have any final wishes? How about one last conquest in France? And so in 1544, Henry made for Calais. The pesky French had been supporting the Scottish in their ongoing wars with England, and they also owed Henry some money. So the extremely unhealthy king personally led a siege against the French city of Boulogne. The English dug tunnels under the castle, and on the 13th of September, the French surrendered. A glorious victory for Henry. In actuality, the whole misadventure nearly bankrupted England, and they ended up giving Boulogne back to the French a few years later. But shh, don't tell Henry. He's having his moment. Finally, in 1547, a 55-year-old Henry, lapsing in and out of consciousness, passed away. His son, Edward, succeeded him, but died just 5 years later. His daughter, Mary, briefly took the reins and steered the country back towards the Pope. But then his second daughter embraced reformist ideas and gradually transformed England into a Protestant country. Henry's desperation to marry Anne Boleyn and his resulting feud with the Pope had changed the course of English history and religion forever. Unfortunately, none of Henry's children had heirs, and when Elizabeth I died, Henry's lineage ended, with the House of Stuart replacing the House of Tudor. So then you might think, all that effort, a life filled with so much frustration, yet he never conquered France, he barely had a male heir, and his lineage died out. The egotistical man Henry grew sick and cruel, and then died. So why are we all so fascinated with King Henry VIII? Why not Henry II or IV? Well, without mentioning the many important things his reign did achieve, one of his biggest goals was to go down in history. And you can put a big green check beside that one, because everything he did and how he asserted his control and authority over everyone around him has come to be viewed as the epitome of the word king. And also because of the wife killings? Yeah, definitely the wife killings.
Here we go again. It's nacho night with a side of gas and diarrhea.
Sound familiar? Any of these digestive issues after eating may cause you to second.
This video was made possible by NordVPN. Click on the link in the description below to get an amazing 68% off a 2-year plan. Also, commemorating the weirdest romance in history. Get your new character pins and Russian Revolution merch available now. Link down below. Hey Jimmy, it's the 1800s, an exciting time to be alive. Why don't you get out there and explore the world? Gee whiz, Mom, thanks. This place is amazing. Where am I? Why, you're in France, my boy. Here we come up with wacky new ways of running a country. Liberty, legality, fraternity. Whoa, welcome to the United Kingdom. Here we invented the train. Whoa, aboard! Holy smokes! You're in a German factory, my friend. Here we harness fire and coal to create all these sexy leaderhoods. This is incredible! I can't wait to see where I'll end up next. Where am I? You're in Russia. Have I gone back in time? No, this is just how it is. Are you a farmer? Worse. Technically, my landlord owns me, which makes me a serf. I'm scared. You should be, because I haven't eaten in 4 days, and you look pretty tasty. Hey, Jimmy, how are your travels?
I hate you!
Russia in the 19th century. Feudal, underdeveloped, and stuck in the past. While the rest of Europe had been modernizing and improving their citizens' lives, Russia's rulers were taking a different approach. My lord, we're falling behind the rest of Europe. It's time to industrialize, give the people rights, and share your power. Russian czars had no time for pathetic ideas like liberty and modernization because they were too busy having the time of their lives. While the serfs were breaking their backs in the field, the czars held all the power and they didn't have to listen to anyone. Want to run the country like a backwards feudal kingdom while the rest of Europe outpaces you militarily and economically? Go right ahead. Want people who are uneducated so they don't get any ideas? There's no one to stop you. Want to keep exporting grain even when there's a massive famine causing hundreds of thousands to die? That is your God-given right. While all of this was great for the Tsar, if you were literally anybody else, it probably sucked because Russia was falling behind. If they were to keep up with Europe, they'd need a strong ruler with some big ideas. Oh look, here comes one now. Hey everyone, it's me, Tsar Alexander II, and I've got some big news. I'm releasing you all from your serfdom. You're all free. Yeah, I'm the best. Oh, there is one thing though. I spoke to your local lords and they weren't happy about losing all their free labor. So as a compromise, you're all gonna have to pay them back a near impossible amount of money for the next 49 years. Expect your lives to vary big. Okay, bye. Now I know what you're thinking. This Tsar Alexander II seems like a pretty cool guy. He's trying to reform the country and get Russia on the right path. Everyone must love this guy, right? Wrong. Why does one man get to decide the fate of everyone in the country? This whole system is dumb. Somebody should do something. Like what? Like kill the Tsar. You're gonna kill the Tsar? Well, me? No. I'm busy. I was kinda hoping you'd do it. Okay. See? The people love me. They're throwing flowers, confetti, and high-grade explosives. Okay, Nicholas, your grandfather has a mild case of being blown up by a terrorist, and he's not looking too hot, so we're gonna go say our goodbyes, okay? No, it'll be too scary for him. Nonsense, it won't be scary at all. We're just gonna say a quick goodbye. Ready?
Boy, look at me. The people did this to me. And one day, they'll do it to you!
See? Wasn't scary at all. So Alexander II was dead, but luckily they had another Alexander lying around, Alexander III, and he felt his dad's reforms had weakened the Tsar's authority. Russia was massive, and as a result, had many ethnic minorities. Non-Russians, more interested in their own cultural heritage than in loving me? Isn't it great? So much beautiful culture and diversity in our great nation. Alexander thought all these minorities should be a little more Russian, and thereby loyal to him. So he repressed religious minorities. He repressed non-Russians. He introduced the Okhrana, a secret police force that repressed anybody who thought having a Tsar was dumb. If Alexander II was the great reformer, Alexander III was the great repressor. Now that's how you run a country. Hey, Dad? Ugh, great. My son is a girly girl because he's so weak and pathetic. When are you gonna grow up? You still look like a girly girl to me. But Dad, I grew a beard. Yeah, an ugly girly girl beard. If Nicholas was to one day be Tsar, he needed his dad to teach him how to run the country. But his dad instead suggested that Nicholas go somewhere else. So Nicholas went to Japan, got an edgy dragon tattoo, had his head sliced off by a policeman, and then came home. Now will you teach me how to rule? I suppose it's time. Okay, there's a lot you need to know before becoming Tsar. Uh-oh. What? I've got kidney inflammation.
No.
Upon his father's death, a totally unprepared Nicholas II ascended to the Russian throne. He wasn't a reformer like his grandfather, nor was he a repressor like his dad. Nicholas was Nicholas, timid, easily swayed, and more interested in doing whatever the hell this is. Or this. Or this. He wasn't ready to rule, and he himself admitted it, saying, "I'm not yet ready to be Tsar. I know nothing of the business of ruling." However, Nicholas firmly believed that he was chosen by God to be Russia's big daddy, and while he doubted his ability to rule, he was going to give it his best shot. And hey, who knows, maybe he wouldn't be so bad after all. To get things off to a good start, Nicholas promised free pretzels and beer to a huge crowd in Moscow to celebrate his coronation, so enticing a proposition to starving peasants that the ensuing stampede left nearly 1,500 people dead. What the hell happened? We're not sure, but you're scheduled to go party with the French at 8 o'clock. Shouldn't I say you're out of respect for the people? When have Russian Tsars ever respected the people? Nicholas's decision to go party with the French immediately tarnished his image. Some were calling him Nicholas the Bloody. The Tsars had been partying hard at the expense of the people for long enough. They'd emancipated the serfs, but failed to lift them out of poverty. They used their secret police to crack down on anyone who might criticize them, and they failed to modernize and give the people rights, something the rest of Europe had begun doing over a century ago. The rule of the Tsars was quickly becoming outdated, and more Russians began wondering if there was a better way. For many, the solution was simple. Just look to the West. Republics, democracies, and constitutional monarchies galore. But a small growing group rejected that for an even better idea, a little something they called communism. Take Vladimir Lenin, an intelligent member of Russian middle class, and also a massive ill-tempered jerk. If you disagreed with him about anything, he wasn't afraid to call you out. You fat-headed, simple-minded, fat-headed, cockeyed imbecile! Tenderheart Bear is a far superior Care Bear to Bedtime Bear! And he was no stranger to political unrest either. His older brother was executed for plotting to kill the Tsar, and Lenin himself was expelled from university for participating in a student protest. But how did Lenin go from being a middle-class elite to the arbiter of socialist divinity? Well, to tell that story, we first need to go back a few decades to when a man named Karl Marx wrote a